You've got a cow. You want to teach it how to live all of its life in the open ocean, still retaining its air-breathing characteristics. What do you have to do from an engineering point of view to change the cow into a whale? Good question. David Bielinski was nominated for a Golden Crocoduck a few years ago, but Ivy resurrected the nomination because we had a couple of other nominations this year on exactly the same theme, improbability. Bielinski is pondering evolution, which apparently requires turning cows into whales. Virtually every feature of the cow has to be changed. It has to be adapted. But since we know that life on Earth and life in the water are fundamentally different enterprises, we have some sense of the number of changes. We're not talking about genetics. We're talking about simple numbers. The skin has to change completely. It has to become impermeable to water. That's on change. Breathing apparatus has to change. A diving apparatus has to be put in place. Lactation systems have to be designed. The eyes have to be protected. The hearing has to be altered. Salivary organs have to be changed. Feeding mechanisms have to be changed. After all, a cow eats grass, a whale dozed. As I say, Ivy tried to do some of these calculations. The calculations are certainly not hard. But they interesting because they stopped at 50,000. That is morphological changes. Okay, that's enough. Let's go back a bit. Bielinski, a mathematician and a philosopher, and I freely admit that you're much smarter than me. You've taught at university, and I came bottom of the class. But even I know that cows did not turn into whales. I think you've been watching too many creationist videos. Yes, I understand you're talking philosophically and the principle of one animal turning into another. But if you're going to count the number of changes from one particular species to another, at least get your examples right. Whales and cows both evolved from a common ancestor that lived about 50 million years ago, partly in the water and partly on land. By the way, I know Bielinski claims not to be a creationist, but he's using a creationist argument. He's a senior fellow of the Discovery Institute, and his breach of the Ninth Commandment is promoting the creationist cause, so he does qualify for a coveted Golden Crocoduck. Bielinski counts at least 50,000 changes from a cow to a whale because, he explains, a cow is a land animal completely inadapted to living in the water. But the archidactyl is already halfway there, so let's say it needs half as many changes, about 25,000. It needs to get bigger, have its nostrils moved higher, its hands would have to be used as flippers, and so on. And this has to be done over the course of about 50 million years. Well, let's see. If the animal takes 7 years to reach breeding age, about halfway between a whale and a rodent, then 25,000 changes would have to take place over 7 million generations. That's about one change every 285 generations, hardly outside the bounds of possibility. But what are the chances of these thousands of changes happening in exactly the right way to make a whale? Now there we would agree with Bielinski. The odds against it are staggeringly high. So how did such impossible odds get beaten? The answer lies in the story of Sandeep Singh, who won $30 million in the Mega Millions lottery. And here's Jack Whittaker, who won $315 million in the Powerball lottery. Neil Wanless won $232 million, and Solomon Jackson Jr. won $260 million. So what, you might think? Well, the odds of Singh, or any of the others, winning is 1 in 175 million, which means that the odds of Singh and Whittaker and Wanless and Jackson winning are 875 million billion to 1. So how were such odds beaten without any of us thinking it extraordinary? Well, The astute among you will already have figured out why. The odds against anything happening are of course going to be astronomically high if you try to achieve a known outcome. In other words, if you name those people who are going to win the lotteries. I don't play the lottery, but as far as I know, a jackpot just keeps getting bigger until a winner is found. So the odds of someone winning are in fact statistically 1 in 1, a certainty. If Singh and Whittaker and Wanlass and Jackson had won, 4 other people would have won. We can lengthen the odds even more by looking at the chances of Singh or Whittaker or Wanlass even being born. They re about the same as the chances of me being born, which are astronomically high against it. Maybe I'm only here because a German pilot met a girl at a wedding and the extra few seconds he spent waving goodbye to her from the cockpit of his bomber delayed his takeoff, which meant that he dropped his bombs over Portsmouth a few seconds later than planned, so that instead of killing me father, one of the bombs killed the man standing next to him. Going even further back, if my ancestor John Hadfield had signed this contract to buy a farm in 1605, he would have stayed at his old farm in Whitfold, and all of me subsequent family history would have been different. Even me great-great-great-great-great-great-grandparents wouldn't have been born. The odds against me being born are astronomical, because every tiny event in history had to happen exactly the way it happened. No, it's not fate or divine will, it's simple. If I hadn't been born, someone else would have been born. If Sandeep Singh had won the lottery, someone else would. And if the archidactyl had devolved into a whale, it would have evolved into something else. And that's the problem with similar probability arguments, like the one that says the odds are astronomically against the Earth to exist as we know it. Similar Again, if you start with the Earth as we know it and work backwards, then of course the odds are astronomically against. But if you start with the universe as it is and calculate the odds of an Earth-like planet, in other words a planet that's cool enough for water not to boil and warm enough that it does a magnetic field to warn off solar Out of the trillions upon trillions of star systems, there must be billions of planets that fit the bill. But that brings us to the next probability argument. The planet might have the right environment and ingredients, but what are the chances chemicals will come together to form life? Abiogenesis is the idea that life can form from non-living material, which is also called spontaneous generation, which was proven wrong over 200 years ago. Whoa, hey, what? Oh, it's Surrey Boy. He's back as a YouTuber called Horsewilb. As what? I don't know. Now what's this about abiogenesis also being called spontaneous generation? No prizes for guessing that Horsewilby got this wrong. Abiogenesis is called abiogenesis. Spontaneous generation is a discredited Aristotelian idea that tried to explain the sudden overnight appearance of things like maggots and mushrooms. It didn't try to explain the formation of nucleic acids. That's abiogenesis. See the difference. Spontaneous generation was disproved by Louis Pasteur and John Tyndall in this simple experiment. They showed that apparently spontaneously generated organisms had their origins in spores and eggs. But we wouldn't expect Horsewilby to know that because he's just reading some crap he got off the internet. But back to the question of probability. The smallest living cell on Earth has a Na string of some 1,000,000 pairs of Na, and it has 600 genes. If we cut this number and just took a quarter of that, we would have a string of some 250,000 base pairs of Na. That is still a hefty number. The chances of such an arrangement of Na arising by sheer chance are 4 to the 250,000th power, and that's generous. A video called Chatting with Charlie makes the same case. Sir Frederick Hoyle said the chance of the chemicals of which Na occur were to show up in the same place at the same time is like 10 to the 40,000th. So, the cell occur were the cell Of course, Hoyle wrote this long before new discoveries showed that Na had evolved, probably from Urnai. And sorry, Horsewilb, but the cell evolved too. For these things to suddenly appear fully formed would be spontaneous generation, which Horsewilb has already told us doesn't happen, except in imaginary cases. And as every creationist doesn't know, evolution is not driven by some random process. It's driven by natural selection. I addressed this in a much earlier video that was on my other channel, potholer54 debunks. In trying to similarly explain the difficulty in getting all of the sequences of Na together, Hal Holbrook is explaining the impossibility of getting 20 numbers in sequence. Now let's suppose that we could play at blinding speed and get all 20 blocks out in just 1 second, then do it again the next second and every second thereafter. The law of averages says that I can expect to get the 20 blocks out of the box in order at the rate of once every 77 billion years. Natural selection works by selecting those traits, in this case numbers, that are advantageous, fit to survive, and rejecting those that aren't. That's what survival of the fittest is all about. So we pick the numbers at random. Sure. If the first one out of the box is a 6 or a 12, it gets rejected and goes back. If it's a 1, then that's an advantageous trait that survives. We then move on to the second number, and so on. If we pick one number every second, as the video suggests, then it would only take 20 seconds at the most to get our first correct number, number 1. It'll take 19 seconds at the most to get the next number in the sequence, number 2, and 18 seconds at the most to get number 3. This means it'll take the mayor of Amity Island just 346 seconds, less than 6 minutes, to get all the numbers in sequence. That's a very different to 77 million years, and that's the difference between natural selection and natural chance. If this was a random process, yes. But now let's apply the rules of natural selection, which says that beneficial traits are kept and non-beneficial ones are rejected. Every time a slot machine comes up with a little bacterium, it stays there and the wheels that didn't show a bacterium roll again. If there are 6 symbols on the rollers, each of these wheels will come up with a bacterium one time out of 6. If it takes 10 seconds for each pull on the slot machine, that means it'll take about a minute for each wheel to register a bacterium. And since each wheel is running at the same time, and all 250 machines are running at the same time, it'll take just 1 minute for every single one to hit the jackpot. This is why the casinos don't let you select which symbol to hold on every wheel. Apparently they understand evolution. And finally there's the probability pusher, who has the occasional senior moment. I'm assuming that 1 million beneficial mutations are needed to make a species evolve into another. I'm assuming that 30 million species have existed throughout all time. This is actually the estimate for species alive today. I'm assuming that every single beneficial mutation is kept in the population once it occurs, which means that natural selection is perfect. Now the probability of evolution is 1 in 10 to the power of the evolution, the probability Wait. I got all the assumptions, and I saw the final result. What's missing is how you actually work this all out. You know, the yada in the middle. I guess we'll never know. Creationists love to focus on the huge numbers and show just how improbable odds are, while skipping over the detail of how these numbers are derived in the first place. Like, for example, the calculation he made that Venomfangs, now calling himself Horsewilb, will ever stop reading internet blogs and read just one page of a primary school science book. Computing the amount of homeschooling he must have received from creationist parents, coupled with a high level of hormonal activity, the calculation is yada, and the answer is 1 in 10 to the power of 90 trillion. 10 to the 40,000, 4 to the 250,000th power.